I would now like to call on stage a man who dons many hats. He is a member of the Advisory Committee of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, serves as a consultant to the World Bank Group, and has formerly been the chairman of National Housing Bank. Please join me in welcoming on stage R.V. Verma, Director, India Mortgage Guarantee Corporation, to deliver the concluding remarks.
Thank you, Shreya. At the outset, I must compliment the IMGC team, Mahesh and his entire team, for having put together this great event. This is the first mortgage leadership conclave, and I'm sure it will be repeated again and again. I must compliment the panelists in both the sessions, and I think a lot of issues came to the fore, very exciting issues, very new insights, and I'm sure the audience will take them home. It will sink in gradually, I feel, because the issues were of such great depth and implication and relevance to the mortgage industry today and the emerging mortgage industry. So I'll attempt not to be disruptive to this process of the issues setting in. The wide range of issues that were discussed, and I personally feel very enriched from the kind of knowledge, the expertise of the practitioners and the policymakers. I'm not here to really sum up the deliberations of the day. That will be very tough. So, but I have a couple of views on the agenda and the way they were structured and the way they were deliberated upon. It will do us a lot of good if we can sort of, after the event has happened, then put together a kind of a compendium of the takeaways from here and the thoughts which were expressed. I think some team will need to really get on with that, and that will be a very, very useful product for all of us, and that can be circulated in the industry in terms of the knowledge bandwidth which was on display here, and also the free exchange of views, divergent views, all backed by experience and logic, and that is something which is very, very, very striking. I've been to a number of such kind of conferences, but the richness and the depth of the two panel discussions, I think, was extremely good. Shreya, in fact, in her opening remarks, she did quote Matthew Desmond in relation to his views on the housing sector, and coincidentally, I also have a quote of his, and it was absolute pure coincidence. So I'd like to just sort of start off with that, and I thought this was extremely striking in terms of the whole gamut of issues which he tries to put together in a couple of sentences. So to quote Matthew Desmond, an eminent American sociologist, now I quote him: "Housing provides sturdiest of footholds for all economic activities. A national affordable housing program would be an anti-poverty effort, human capital investment, community improvement plan, and public health initiative all rolled into one." I think this is something of extreme depth and vision, and which can be a prescriptive roadmap for all policymakers. He goes on to say, "I'm not naive about the problem, but I think that stable, steady housing is one of the surest footholds we could have on the road to financial stability." So in a nutshell, he talks about housing program being an anti-poverty alleviation program, poverty alleviation program, human capital investment, community improvement plan, public health initiative, and all that leading to financial stability. So this is something which the policymakers would do well to really recognize and build into their policy agenda. Housing is the most universal product, and demanded by all, in all geographies, in all locations, metros, state capitals, tier 2, tier 3 cities, rural areas, and supply can never match demand. That's something which is given. I remember when the National Housing Bank was set up, just to go back in time a little, we were talking about housing shortage to the extent of 24.7 million. 24.7 million was a fixed figure which continued to remain at that for several years to come. We are 30 years later now, and we have the housing shortage estimated at 18.3 million. I think it will suffice to say that the demand will always keep growing. It will always be more than supply. And the housing shortage is something that we learn to live with. We'll work towards minimizing the shortage. But in a country like ours, I don't see the housing demand being met 100%. We have the government program on housing for all by 2022, which is a very, very sort of laudable program, and we are inching towards that. But there are several roadblocks which will need to be overcome. There are several nuances which will need to be understood, several implications from both the real sector, which is the real economy, the construction side, as well as the financing side, which will need to be clearly understood. So, need for a stable and sustainable market to serve the housing needs. In this 30 years' time, a lot of achievements have happened. We have seen the number of institutions grow in this sector. There has been a lot of institutional deepening in the market. There has been a very rich growth of market infrastructure. And market infrastructure has been, I think, the key factor in the growth of the stable and sustainable housing finance system. By market infrastructure, I mean, certain policy reforms, structural reforms, institution building, legislative changes, which have happened over a period of time, and they all relate to the market infrastructure. At this point of time, in fact, when the policy paradigm, the regulatory paradigm, and whether it's the fiscal side or the real economy side, we have different players coming together to participate in the program of Housing for All. But there are disconnects. And that's something which we need to be very conscious about and work towards, in fact, eliminating those disconnects. When we are talking about the housing finance industry, I guess we are talking about the housing finance ecosystem overall. And that's something which has always been a challenge. We have been grappling with the issues in the real estate sector, in the construction industry, at the center and the state levels. We have the housing sector essentially an agenda of the state government and the local bodies. And that's where a lot of disconnect lies. The robustness of the housing finance industry or the sustainability of the housing finance industry is one aspect of the housing sector. But the gaps and distortions in the real estate sector, that is the real economy, can impact the efficiency of the housing finance system, efficiency of housing credit system. So there has to be a integration between the housing finance sector and the real economy, which is dealing with construction infrastructure development, approvals, technology. So all these have to be looked at in a very integrated manner. They all together form the housing finance ecosystem. So I think Mr. Sinha also mentioned in his remarks that it's the real economy whose distortions tend to rub off on the housing finance system. So we need to look at the housing finance sector, the credit system, and the real economy side of it in a holistic and integrated manner. And look at the possibility of reforming the institutions which are involved. There have been a number of measures over a period of time for institutional reforms, for the sectoral reforms, and for institutional deepening. We had housing finance companies numbering only 3 in 1988. 30 years now, we have close to 100. Already, I think 97 have been registered, and with the applications pending with the National Housing Bank, I understand that it's more than 100. So, in terms of the number of institutions serving this market, it has grown. Banks have come on board fully, and housing is the first love of all the lenders. We have seen banks entering this field in around turn of the century, and they haven't looked back. Today, in a 16 trillion Indian rupees industry, we have nearly about 70% lending by the banks and 30% by the housing finance companies. So, funding has come to stay. There is no dearth of flow of funds into the housing sector, but the efficiency, the ecosystem, I mean, the way the funds are deployed, are we getting efficient outcomes? Are we getting optimum outcomes? That's something which is important, and that also depends on the efficiency of the construction industry, efficiency of the housing mortgage industry. So we have to look at it holistically and then decide on where to move, what kind of policy interventions are required, at what levels, and recommend the same. There have been engagements with the government, both at the central and the state levels, and the urban local bodies too. But clearly, I think 2 recent initiatives of the Government of India through legislation are bound to show a very positive result, and they'll yield very, very positive, I think, result in due course of time. One is the legislation of RERA itself, the Real Estate Regulatory and Development Act, which is it's a very important milestone in the evolution of the housing finance industry and the construction industry particularly. It brings together all the actors on the same platform and is, I think, the first ever measure of this kind of a national importance, which deals with the consumer protection issues very, very squarely. And that's something which needs to be taken forward by the state governments, and a number of state governments, about 16 of them, have already enacted RERA, but they may not be all on the same page. So that's a very, very progressive legislation, which I'm sure would bring a lot of value to the housing finance industry. Other than that, we have the market infrastructure initiatives like credit bureaus, where we have a lot of information coming not only from the formal sector, but the informal sector borrowers, which has been more or less institutionalized now. We have the CERSAI portal, we have digitization of the land records, etc. in various states. So altogether, over the past 25, 30 years, so many things have happened. But I still feel that all this could have happened in a much shorter time, maybe 10, 15 years, barring those legislations which have to see different governments in time and which could be more engaging than other measures. So, I mean, despite all these important legislations and all these initiatives of the government, the regulators, the policymakers, the housing shortage remains at 18.3 million. It keeps staring us all the time. So there is a lot more to do. We are not really getting to the crux of the issue as to what is it that is going to really reduce this gap significantly. That's something which is engaging the policymakers and the government. but the solution is not really coming forth and cannot come forth so easily. So we really need to look at the housing sector and the housing finance system in the broader perspective of houselessness across the country, and to remove houselessness across the country and meet the housing shortage very squarely. We have a large number of institutions. Still, we have a huge informal sector. Are we dealing with the construction of houses for the informal sector? Are we dealing with financing the informal sector borrowers? So, how is it that we can formalize the informal sector? That informal sector will keep growing. We have migration happening, from the smaller towns to the big cities. We have the growth of slums. We have smart city initiatives. We have urban planning. Does housing figure in there? So we have to look at housing as part and parcel of the overall urbanization. Housing to be plugged in the city growth model, in the urban planning model, and maybe inter-regional planning model as well. So the bigger picture of looking at housing in isolation from the rest of the economic development, I don't think that will really take us far. Housing is integrated with the rest of the economy, and housing finance is integrated with the entire financial market. So we have these two integrations. What we need to do is actually integrate the housing finance system with the real economy. That's the construction, land development, infrastructure, technology, and the players who are involved in the real estate sector. So that's something which, it has its own dynamics, and I'll not go into that. But those are the bigger issues which are really important and could be very, very challenging. So we have various legislations today. I'm sure by the time we meet next year or whenever in this kind of a forum, we'll have a little more incremental experience in how the various legislative changes or the institutional reforms are really playing out. And the extent of housing shortage, I don't see the shortage really closing, but as long as we keep moving in the direction, that should be enough. There has been institutional deepening. There is enough financing happening today. About 4 trillion INR on an annual basis is good investments, and that's good flow coming into the sector. The institutions are strong, though the housing finance industry is very skewed industry. It has small players, mid-level players, and the large players, but there's been enough interest and excitement amongst the institutions which are actually engaged in the housing finance industry. So we have all the settings of a sound, vibrant, and sustainable housing finance system. We have diversified products. We have customized products. We have housing finance companies reaching out to the informal sector borrowers and very successfully. What we need to do is scale up. And ramping up the business is not so easy. You have a risk staring at you. We have all kinds of risks, so you need to have very strong risk management skills. We have today professionals in the housing finance industry are very well skilled, which we did not have some years ago. But today we have the industry full of professionals who are very well skilled, and I'm sure they can contribute to the growth of the sound and sustainable housing finance market. So, of course, a couple of thoughts which I thought I'll share with you all is on ease of doing business. Now, for the borrowers, the transaction has to be easy to contract, easy to transact, easy for the lenders, easy to close, easy to foreclose. So all this is part of the ecosystem. Now, easy to contract and easy to transact is not so easy. And we can say that we are moving up the ease of doing business ladder, but housing sector is still got to be seriously attended. And it was very encouraging to read the remarks of the Secretary DIPP, Government of India, saying that now they'll go down to the state level, the urban local level to handle or to address the issues of transactions documentation and the contracting of agreement, etc., on the real estate, which will certainly make a difference. The policy is something which has stunted the growth in the past. The clear policy enunciations of this government at the center and the state level is important. Infrastructural maze, I would say that there has been some kind of confusion around the infrastructure provisioning. The public-private partnership model itself has been faulted at times. There is no clear-cut role for either the private sector or the public sector, and leading to more confusion and distortion of the industry as a result. The investments in the housing market from domestic investors as well as the international investors has sometimes been a matter of concern, but that would really require the real reforms to happen in the housing finance industry to be able to attract the investment from domestic as well as the international investors. That would mean that we have to make the sector still to become very competitive. The competitiveness of the housing sector is important, and that's where a lot of measures are still required. And it entered the housing and real estate sector, entered the industry at a time when other sectors were more advanced. So it was on a non-level playing field. But it has caught up, and we see good amount of investments happening here, and which has been the result of a number of liberalization measures, a number of reform measures of the Government of India in terms of, and more recently, affordable housing being declared as part of the infrastructure. But declaring them as part of the infrastructure is one thing, and the benefits of infrastructure accruing to the housing sector is quite another. So that's something which we have to assess and see whether the housing sector is really getting the benefits of infrastructure status. And that's where we are not very sure, but these are the issues which we'll need to sort of address and assess from time to time. So I'll close at that, and I'm still sort of the ideas which came across in the last two panel discussions, which were very, very enriching, and I'm sure you will take them home. And it's been, in fact, very wide-ranging, and we had all the players who really matter on the housing finance side, not so much on the real estate reconstruction side, which, of course, is a different forum altogether. So I'll end with that. I didn't attempt to really sum up the deliberations of the day or the proceedings of the day, but it was a good opportunity for me to share some of my thoughts as they came. And thank you for this opportunity, Mahesh. Thanks for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Well, that brings us to the end of today's first edition of India Mortgage Leadership Conclave. Thank you all very much to be here. Thank you to all the speakers and panelists for taking out some time with us and sharing such valuable insights. Well, please, let's have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And please do join us for cocktails and dinner. See you, take care, and have a great week ahead.